Greetings, friends, and welcome back to Retro Unscripted. My name is Peter, and today's episode is episode number 31. As always, I thank you very much for taking the time to watch today, and I hope you'll enjoy what you're about to see and hear. I do apologize a bit in advance if my voice is scratchy or stuffy sounding. I'm still on the road to recovery from being sick last week, but hopefully things will be back to normal in the coming days. Here's an interesting position that I read online recently, and I know that you shouldn't believe everything that you read on the internet, but here's the position anyway. Trading in games and systems is an awful idea. I'll let you think about that for a second. Trading in games and systems is an awful idea. Okay, now that you have your position on it, I'm going to give you mine. Trading in games has been a way for me over the years to help fund my video game hobby. I have never had the best paying jobs in the world, at least not yet. I'm hoping that when I get my teaching degree, I'll be making a bit more money. But most of the jobs I've had in my life have been service jobs with salaries in the $20,000, $25,000 a year range. And a lot of that money has had to go toward bills, car insurance, rent, medical bills, car repair, food, uh, you name it. There hasn't been a lot of money left over. So the way that I managed to keep my video game hobby current was I would have to part with some games that I had bought. And it became kind of a loop, if you will. Uh, Back in 1995, and that's significant because that's 20 years ago now, when the PlayStation came out, I was not making enough money at my job to be able to afford a PlayStation and the games that I wanted. I had a bunch of other expenses at the time, and I wasn't making a lot of money. I was making minimum wage at the job that I was at then as an office assistant. So um, I traded in my 3DO and I traded in my Sega CD. And I also paid some money a little bit every week towards the pre-order until it was paid off in full. But I traded those systems away. Now, with the Sega CD, I've been fortunate that 20 years later, thanks to my cousin Sam, I have another Sega CD here in Retro Central that I can play at will. With the 3DO, I haven't been so fortunate, and one of the reasons for that is because the 3DO is just it's expensive now. Um, I don't regret doing it. It was something that I had to do in order to get what I wanted. I really didn't feel like going through and saving money for additional weeks and weeks when I had systems that I thought back then that I could part with without much regret or sacrifice. And so I did that. I have a little bit more of a hole in my gut for my NES collection back in 1999. Back then, I had built up a pretty sizable collection, which I had amassed while I was working for FuncoLand, and I decided to part with that because I was so blown away by the Dreamcast. I knew that I had to get not only the Dreamcast, but there were just so many games at launch that I wanted to have. Being an arcade guy, stuff like Hydro Thunder and NFL Blitz and Ready to Rumble Boxing, not to mention Sonic Adventure and NFL 2K and Soul Calibur. I mean, these games cost money. They're not cheap. So I parted with my entire NES collection, and I had a pretty good one at the time. It was a top-loading NES that I traded away. RC Pro-Am 2 I traded away. Dusty Diamond Softball I traded away. Final Fantasy I traded away. And these are items and games that today, if I'm sure you're probably looking at me asking me what the hell I was thinking. But truth be told, as a FuncoLand store manager back then, coming up with $700 out of pocket to purchase a Dreamcast and the games wasn't easy to do, and was made even more complex by the fact that I was married at the time. I had healthcare expenses I was dealing with because I had just gotten over being very sick. I had wedding expenses that I was dealing with. And there were other factors in as well that made getting the system very difficult to get just by putting money away. So I traded that stuff away. And do I regret it now? a little bit, probably because I don't have the Dreamcast anymore either, and I've already talked about that story in previous episodes. So it seems kind of empty if I look back on it now. But with the PlayStation, I got a ton of play out of that PlayStation that I spent money on, and the PlayStation is still one of my favorite consoles of all time. So I think that that was a pretty fair trade-off. So to knock down trading stuff in as something that's regrettable or a bad idea, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, should you do it if you can afford to spend the money? Probably not. You have to ask yourself important questions. Is this a game that I'm going to find myself missing or wanting to go back to after a while? Do you mind if it's a game that you do realize that you're going to miss? Is it a game that you mind purchasing again at a later date? Which is something else I've done from time to time since I've been buying my own video games in 1991 forward. I've mortgaged a lot of games in the past towards other games, only to rebuy the games that I traded in before. It's a vicious cycle, but for someone that doesn't make a lot of money and considering how expensive the hobby is, it's been something that's been vital for me to be able to do. Now, it's nice here in 2015 to have a lot of those games back that I have lost over the years. And granted, getting those games back or why I get rid of them in the first place is secondary to having them, to being able to play them, and being able to talk about them again. And that, to me, is much more important. But I did have to trade stuff away in the past, and to be honest, I still do that a little bit when it comes to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games. I'm using those systems very sparingly now, so the games are just collecting dust, and they aren't systems that I find myself thinking that I'm going to go back to in another 10 years, especially with servers probably being offline or servers just not working anymore. And who knows what online services for those systems is going to look like in another 10 years. So I'm not even thinking about the viability of those systems as much as I'm thinking about building this library here and all over Retro Central. And trading in games, especially in the financial situation that I'm in, where I'm a full-time student and I'm not working at the current time because I'm focusing on keeping my grades up. I have a very lucky opportunity living here with family right now while I'm in school. The only expectation is that I just have to do well, which I'm doing. But I don't have to worry about stuff like keeping a roof over my head and food at the moment until I do graduate. But with that being said, expendable income doesn't come very often. So in order for me to be able to add games to my library, I do get a little bit of money from time to time, but I do have to trade stuff in from time to time as well. If I see a game or games at Game Depot, which is my new favorite place, and has been for a while, I guess, to add to my library. So trading in may be regrettable and it may be a bad idea, but for a lot of people, it's not only important, but it's vital. Because without that option, without the ability to trade in games that you're no longer playing or that you don't think you're going to be playing for a while to get games that you want, it's not always possible to get those. And it shouldn't be that way if you have items that have worth or value to them. So that's what I'm thinking as far as trade-ins. Sure, I have some that were bad ideas at the time. I'm the moron who traded in a TurboGrafx 16 with a Super System card and a CD player towards Secret of Mana and a few other things back in 1993. I still regret that today. You don't have to kick my ass. I already do it every day. But there are certain trade-ins that I do think are necessary. So let me turn the question to you before my voice does give out. What do you think about trading stuff in, whether it's at GameStop, which you may or may not like, or whether it's at a smaller independent game store like the Game Depot place that I like to go to? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Do you think it being regrettable is a bit hyperbolic? Leave your information and your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear them. Look for another video later this week, probably a review video, but until then, Thanks for watching Retro Unscripted, everybody. Take care.